All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar on how our agencies are showing up for our communities and responding in this current political moment. So, what I'd like to do is have each of the people presenting today introduce themselves, and we will start with Keely. Can you tell us your name, the organization you work for, and your position at that org?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Keely Linton. I am the Executive Director of Strong-Hearted Native Women's Coalition, and we are located down in Southern California.
Thank you, Keely. And May?
My name is May Rico. I am the Executive Director of Healthy Alternatives to Violent Environments, otherwise known as Haven, and we are in the Central Valley in Stanislaus County.
And Sarah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Bemerwald. I'm the Chief Operations Officer at Human Options. We're also in Southern California in Orange County.
Sylvia.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Castillo. I'm Senior Policy Advisor for Genesee. We're located in Los Angeles.
And Kimberly.
Good morning. Good afternoon. My name is Kimberly Monroe, she, her pronouns. I am the Director of Client Services for Empowered Tehama, the local domestic violence and rape crisis response center. We're located here in far northern rural California, centrally located in Red Bluff. Very excited and honored to be here with you all today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And so I'd like to move into our first question, which is, what are you seeing in your region of the state? And we'll start with Sylvia.
Hi, I'm really pleased to be here. Of course, you've probably seen the headlines around the occupation of Los Angeles by the National Guard and the Marines. I'll talk about the direct impact on our women, our clients. We have already experienced masked men coming to our office and to our home, rather, one of the homes we have. They do not show warrants. They knock on the door. They ask for a name. We have instructed and trained our personnel not to allow them to come in. The issue here in Los Angeles is if you go up and down our streets where it's heavily brown, because everyone's getting racial profiled, it's vacant. The issue for us are iced, masked, unmarked cars and men who are move into a space, a Home Depot or a school, a church, or even in front of the social service agencies and the institutions like DPSS, and essentially kidnap people. So the challenge has been with our women, given the experience of DV and the threat of being kidnapped, and we cannot find people. There are no badges. There aren't names on any of the uniforms. Some uniforms say ICE. Some have a patch that says police, but they're very ragtag. So for our women, there is terror. These individuals have shown up at the courthouse. They've shown up at INS. Even if you're there for your hearing, they have essentially kidnapped folks. So we have that we have to contend with. And so in a moment, we'll talk about the resources we need. And I pass it back to you, Tunisia.
Thank you. And I apologize. Tyla, if you'd like to introduce yourself and your agency, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Tunisia, yes. Sorry, I was late hopping off another meeting, but I am Tyla with Black Women for Wellness. I am the Reproductive Justice Manager. And so Black Women for Wellness is a nonprofit reproductive justice organization that's been around for almost 30 years. And we really help to empower and strengthen the health and well-being of Black women and girls through education, empowerment, and programming and advocacy work as well. So happy to be here and amongst all of you today.
Thank you. And I'll give you a moment to catch your breath and come back to you to talk a little bit about what you're seeing in your community. And I did want to say, I didn't even introduce myself. I'm the moderator. I'm Tunisia Owens. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Manager at Family Violence Law Center in Alameda County, where we serve survivors in the court and in the community every day. So I'd like to move to Kimberly. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing?
Thank you, Tunisia. I can. Thank you for asking. Like I mentioned in my introduction, we're in a bit of a unique landscape up here. We're about as far north as you can get in California. And in the rural North State, we're seeing more of a polarized community, differing opinions and varying stances on what's happening at the political and federal level, a shifting landscape. What is true about our rural communities in the far north is that we often hold on to more conservative cultural values, and that can contribute to more traditional practices that can be very challenging in a time like this when we are needing systemic change and we're needing advocacy. Some of those historical norms influence our local attitudes towards social service and equity and accessible care, especially some of those more progressive policies. So that can create a challenge for us in this line of work. But with that challenge also comes, I think, the added layer of the importance of culturally responsive engagement right now and making sure that in our rural communities, we are standing strong and recognizing that we are safe refuge for these populations in a time when safe refuge isn't available. And in a rural community, that doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of trust building and sustained local partnerships and advocacy to get people to understand the impact here and the greater impact of the work that we are doing. So I think it's a very unique, sensitive culture in the far northern division that it's important to speak to and recognize that this is critical, important work, but it's not going to happen overnight. In addition to that, just on the boots on the ground level, under the current political climate, we have seen a significant increase in demand for services. We're still crunching the numbers to figure out exactly what is driving that. But just in the first half of 2025 alone, Empower Tehama has served over 1,000 unduplicated survivors, and we've averaged 24 disclosures of sexual assault each month. And those numbers are strikingly high for a rural community like ours. That's about 10% of the Tehama County population. So it underscores the critical nature of our services. But I will say in rural communities, there is a lot of work to be done to champion the messaging that we're all talking about today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Keely, can you tell us what you're seeing in your community?
Sure, absolutely. So, very similar to the others, we don't, I mean, our program doesn't specifically work with the immigrant population, but we do partner a lot with the different programs in the Southern California region, and we're seeing just really an increase in fear, and even some of the staff from our other partner programs are afraid to travel, like if they're coming from a little bit to the north, and we're based in San Diego County, so having them travel closer to the border, within the state is concerning for them, and same with the clients, just an increased fear and a lot of more information circulating on immigration rights and how do we can protect ourselves as individuals, and then also how to protect ourselves as agencies, and really just kind of sharing what is happening throughout the region, throughout the state, and making sure, if something happens, for example, up in LA, we're talking about it down here in San Diego so that we can prepare for anything that might be happening in our area. So there's just feels like this increase in fear. We are seeing, and again, we work primarily with the tribal community, and so there's an increase in concern for our tribal community being identified as Hispanic or non-citizens, and what that looks like. We've had several community members that have been questioned by ICE or law enforcement on their citizenship and their status. And also with just the funding issues. So many of our programs are federally funded, and so just really trying to figure out how to change up how we normally do things and how we can support each other and still provide victim care in our area. Those are a lot of just different discussions that we've had circulating all around. Um, yeah, I think that's all I can think about at the moment. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Keely. May, can you talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing in your area of the state?
Sure. So Stanislaus County is in the northern San Joaquin Valley. So we're about the center of the Central Valley. And a lot of what Kimberly was saying about attitudes and culture, I really resonate with here. We have this odd mix of very conservative values when you're talking about politics and who's in charge. Although in Stanislaus County, Democrats are actually, you have more registered Democrats than you do Republicans, but the Republican conservative values are kind of what drive policy. And we have other systems that are really trying to push forward more progressive, equitable changes to systems. So it's an interesting place to be. In that mix, not long after the election, some of the LGBTQ activist groups started talking about almost immediately experiencing an increase in threats and language around hate crimes and really just an immediate shift in their safety. And we're seeing some of the organizations that have been traditional allies stepping back out of fear, and I think a lot of it is the funding fear. Modesto Junior College has historically flown the pride flag, and this year initially they weren't going to. So seeing those kinds of changes, which I know for folks in that community feels, I've heard them express feeling abandoned by systems that before felt supportive. And then in the area of immigration, we haven't had the same type of experiences as in what I'm hearing happening down south. There are stories of increased ICE activity in Stanislaus County, but they haven't yet been verified. So it's trying to figure out, is there really an increased presence, or is the fear driving, someone seeing an unmarked police officer that's there doing something else, and there's fear that it's ICE. While we know there's been some activity, I don't know. We haven't been able to confirm what the increased pattern actually is, but there is just so much fear. Like Keely was saying, we've had when there are stories going up of increased ICE activity, we've had staff that are afraid to come to work because they have mixed status families and they want to be available for their families if they need anything. While other shelter providers early on had started reporting seeing a decrease in Latina clients, we hadn't seen that until now. I was talking with our shelter manager yesterday, and she said that on the crisis line, we're using our Spanish translation services less than we usually do. And we're not seeing the number of clients coming in. And she said this time of year, there's often a dip, but this is different. And it's a little chilling that the folks who need us the most might be afraid to call.
Thank you, May. Sarah, can you talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing?
Yeah, so we're in Orange County, halfway between Los Angeles and San Diego. We have also seen the National Guard deployed primarily in the Civic Center area in Santa Ana, but they've also been spotted throughout the county. Definitely intensive immigration enforcement activities throughout the county that are really driving a lot of community fear and a sharp decrease in walk-ins to our community-facing sites. We've seen dips as much as 75% in our foot traffic, which again, some of that is to be expected, with school getting out in the summertime, but certainly not to this degree. I would say we haven't seen the dip in calls, so we're still getting the calls. Clients are still accessing services virtually. I think it's really important that we're all continuing to offer, flexibility in services to meet clients where they're at, because for a lot of clients right now, they're afraid to leave their home. So accessing services telephonically or over Zoom is going to be the way to go. But I think, that fear has impacted staff as well as clients. We certainly have staff and clients who have mixed families, regardless of their own documentation status. There may be others in their family who are concerned for their safety. And quite frankly, even for folks who are documented, that's not an absolute bar to being stopped by immigration enforcement. And something we've been really focusing on our team is reinforcing our policies and procedures, making sure that folks are trained on what to do if immigration enforcement were to come to the door, but also talking with clients about how to safety plan for themselves and their families in the event that they are stopped or, God forbid, deported, that they have a plan in place for their family, especially for those with minor children.
Thank you for that, Sarah. And Tyler, I'd like to come back to you. So what are you seeing in your community?
Yeah, so Black Women for Wellness, we are based in Los Angeles, more specifically the historic Leimert Park area. And since this administration, we have definitely just been working to fight mis and disinformation, making sure that there are truth tellers out there in the community, and really just fighting all of the chaos and the confusion that they want us to be in, and really trying to turn inward to the community and make sure that they're a trusted voice, kind of on the sentiments of everyone. Definitely impacted by the ICE raids, and we actually held a press conference, I want to say on the 24th. Well, we're in July now. So June 24th, we held a press conference to really let the Black community know that this is also our fight. One in five, at least in Leimert Park, that's a very migrant area. One in five South Central Angelinos are actually immigrants or stem from immigrants. So we wanted to make sure at this press conference that we were bringing together partners and also our Latin community to come together and stand unapologetically in solidarity. The moment wasn't about immigrants versus citizens because it's about all of us. And we really wanted to bring together those voices to recognize that we have to mobilize. And so it was a good time to come together and to recognize that we understand the fear, we understand the presence, but this military presence in our neighborhoods is not safe for anyone. And so we came together and we really spoke on that. And especially being a reproductive justice organization, we've had ISIS, I'm mistaking her last name, Monterosa Limas, I believe, but she has lost her child while in ICE custody. And so really, as a reproductive justice organization, understanding the ICE harms, understanding that this military presence and the chemicals and the tear gas, that also harms your reproductive justice organs. And really, we're kind of like understanding the fight that we're all entwined together as one. And so we're not a direct service, and we mainly, in the name, kind of serve Black women and girls, but understanding the immigrant population that exists within Black communities and how this also impacts us. And also just kind of the data of how when you have a military presence, regardless of your citizenship status, how you can be infected was really our coming together story to let us know that it's a all of us fight. One of the biggest things on top of fighting that mis and disinformation is us bringing community together to mobilize. There's power in numbers, and we have to stand up against this fascist, racist administration. And that's been our messaging, and that's been kind of what we've been pushing forward as well. But fear does exist, similar to what people have echoed before. Fear exists. There's been since 2020, there's been about 10 maternity ward closures that's happened in Los Angeles alone. I want to say since 2012, about 46, almost 50 maternity ward closures in the whole state. But with immigration's presence, ICE's presence, women aren't going to their prenatal appointments. People aren't wanting to leave their houses. And so it's really understanding that on top of these maternity ward closures, meaning that you have to travel farther to get the aid and the care that you need, you're also delaying care and delaying and seeking care because you don't know who you're going to bump into outside. And so we've really been kind of hold listening sessions and hold press releases and let people know that we are a community that stands within you. You don't have to join Black Women for Wellness, but these are also other trusted organizations that you can join to mobilize, to get your information, to find your safe haven, to find where you can get the care that you need and know that you will be protected and that you're not alone in kind of feeling and kind of navigating all the chaos that's happening. Um, and that's really what we've been seeing as well, on top of just understanding that this federal bill where it's going to have cuts to education and to our healthcare is coming down the pipeline as well. Like we're intentionally fighting back and we're intentionally letting people know that this angst that you feel, here's how you can get proper information, but also here's how we plan on mobilizing. Here's how we intentionally stay we're planning to fight back and we're not backing down, even if some of your elected officials seem to be seceding to all of the chaos that's happening. So that's kind of what we've been seeing on our neck of the woods in Limerick Park and kind of South Central LA as well.
Thank you, Tyler. So the next question that I wanted to ask everyone, and it sounds like people moved into this question already, but how is your agency responding? So a lot of you have already indicated some of the ways that you're responding. And so I'd like to again bring up those special populations that seem particularly impacted. And so that's with immigration enforcement as a human rights issue, as a civil rights issue, looking at the LGBTQ plus population, and again, human rights there, looking at the criminalization of homelessness, um, and women's health and reproductive justice. So all of those populations have been particularly attacked in a number of ways with this current big, beautiful bill, as it is being called, which I think is a misnomer, and also with other policies, including contracts that are coming from HUD. So, as you think about answering the question, how is your agency responding? Keep in mind those populations in your response. So, we're going to start here with May.
So the biggest way that I'm trying to respond is really just looking for opportunities to be able to educate the public and particularly the folks in charge of the systems on the harm that these policies cause, and going in with an assumption of unintended harm. I try and speak as if, I am sure that you as a leader in our community who cares for all of our community would be horrified to understand the harm this policy calls. So let me point that out for you so that you have a different framework to look at it. So I'd mentioned that Modesto Junior College had decided not to fly the flag, the pride flag, and I found out that at the next board meeting for MJC, there were a lot of people that were going to speak up about that. So I was invited to come and be part of that. And I spoke as the representative of Haven, talking about the connection between safety for everyone and safety in accessing services and what that means for a community that has to think about whether it's safe to even reach out to someone to ask for help because they don't know if they'll be accepted, and what flying that flag means for LGBTQ community is the visual representation of acceptance, and how horrible it is when there's been a history that that flag is flown and now suddenly it's not. And the next day, one of my board members, so it was the one who let me know about what was happening, sent me a picture, and MJC was flying the flag. So I am sure that that was much more because of all of the student stories that were shared. But I was glad to be a part of that advocacy. And this morning I was at the Board of Supervisors meeting talking about the new language that is supposed to be going into continuum of care contracts, because in our county it's the Board of Supervisors that is part of the entity that would sign off. And again, talking about, let me explain the harm that this does to specifically trans community when you're saying that you have to um, eliminate all genders except for male and female in all of your stats, and what that means for them in terms of visibility and safety, and the choices that they're having to navigate. And again, for immigrant population, just talking about the fear, and if we are going to a system where we are expected to verify everyone's status, or where they wonder, how is my HMIS data going to be used? When we see what's happening to IRS data and we see what's happening to Medicaid data, why would they trust what housing providers are asking them to enter in HMIS? And telling the Board of Supervisors, I heard they started off with the presentation saying that everyone matters. So I was able to point back to that and say, if you don't fight this, when the choice comes in front of you, if you don't fight this, then you are telling people from these communities that they don't matter and their safety doesn't matter. And there's something that's gone horribly wrong with our county if that's the message we're going to send.
And just for clarity for our audience, HMIS is the Homeless Management Information System. It is a database where providers of housing and homeless services are required to place their clients in within that database and update it with information when you serve clients. Thank you for that, May.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate your response. Kimberly, we're going to go to you. So, how is your agency responding to what you're seeing?
There's a lot. I really appreciate that May spoke to the different experiences that we're having compared to our partners in Southern California when it comes to immigration enforcement. I feel that that in and of itself creates tension in our communities and a feeling like we are just waiting for the ball to drop. So I think that creates a feeling of anxiety amongst our populations and our staff. Definitely echoing what you all have said about an increased fear among our immigrant communities. Response to more fears also amongst our community partners and sister agencies in rural communities who aren't sure how to navigate this. So I see a lot of us leaning on each other to find out what we are doing in our smaller communities. Similarly, and maybe more outwardly so, I have seen a ton of fear from our bicultural staff members who we employ to do this work. Even in organizations like ours, where we champion that we protect people and champion human rights, they do not feel safe, and they're asking for that answer and that protection. And it's a very unsettling environment for our staff. We've strengthened partnerships with local legal entities, including NVCSS and SHARP, which are just our local legal aid organizations, and making sure we have got a critical feeder for immigrant populations to access legal services and documentation assistance. And we continue to prioritize confidentiality in service delivery. I also really wanted to highlight what Sarah mentioned about the importance of meeting people where they are at right now. Tyla, you also said it. People don't feel safe to leave their homes. And so it's really important that we are ensuring our service delivery is flexible enough to support the current climate, the fear, and the comfort level of our survivors. I also think that what we know from the pandemic is that keeping people confined to the home only compounds the risk of escalated incidents and of DV and sexual assault. So the formula in and of itself is contributing to more of an issue and more harm than help. And that is specific to immigrant populations and just what we're seeing in our rural communities. I don't know, Tanisha, if you want us to go into other populations or wait for that facilitation piece. Do you want me to speak to some of the other populations that maybe are on my mind?
Yes, I definitely like you to speak to other populations
Well,
as
you had
well.
mentioned the criminalization status of homelessness, and that just hits me very deeply. So I want to speak just for a minute on that. In Red Bluff, California, specifically, we opened a navigation center a couple of years ago. It's been a critical step forward in the kind of non-punitive, trauma-informed support for homeless survivors. And any unhoused individual, really. So we've had to partner very closely with that navigation center to provide service delivery to those populations and work closely with our continuum of care, making sure that we're rooting into policy development where housing is a human right. Housing, we talk about this a lot at the cohort level, housing is a human right and housing is healthcare. The criminalization of homelessness is slow trickling to our rural community, but it is another one of those tension points that we feel inevitably is encroaching. In talking with our local continuum of care, this conversation comes up a lot. The criminalization of homelessness is known as a status crime. And that is basically criminalizing people for who they are rather than something that they have done. And crimes are a choice, homelessness is not. And so, again, it's another representation of that formula that's being applied that is a misnomer and a misapplication. It's really doing a disservice to our survivors and to our agencies who are providing those services. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Kimberly. I think it's definitely important that both you and May brought up how we are responding in rural communities. It's a very different thing than what we might experience in urban and suburban communities. So I also wanted to make sure, Keely, that we heard from you about um, how are we responding in tribal communities, and how are tribal communities being impacted by this this administration?
Absolutely. Well, very similar to everyone. I guess an additional crux that we have to worry about, which is similar to the counties or cities, is government funding. A lot of our tribes are federally funded to provide, services to the community. And so, in addition to our victim services and housing being impacted by federal funds, our tribal governments are also impacted by the federal funding cuts. So we have to have those concerns. And then really just the same as what May was talking about is educating everyone on, what the real impacts are. What does that mean? How our funding is being utilized, how we're scrutinized. I think there's this idea that so many of the grant fundings that we receive are just wasteful. And so really educating people on how we're very micromanaged, managing these federal grants, and every dollar is accounted for, and we have to have everything approved. And so educating them on those micro levels as well as the larger social impact levels that we have to discuss on how things are impacting our clients, how it's impacting our staff, how it's impacting our agencies as a whole, and what does that mean for the larger communities. I do want to say too, one of our responses for the backlash on our LGBTQ communities, we've worked so hard to just be visible as tribal people. And then in addition, trying to get our Two-Spirit relatives to be visible. It really felt disheartening when there was so many agencies that you felt that have been supportive in the past really just withdrew and pulled back their support. So I felt like as an agency we had decided to not make any changes and make sure that we're supporting our Two-Spirit relatives, that we had so many less allies than we thought we did. And so that was really disheartening. And um, and a lot of, I think, anger came out of that, from our staff, from our clients, from some of our other community members as well. So, and that just builds rifts, I feel, for the future too. I mean, these are allies that we thought we could rely on. Now it's, what does that relationship look like for the future? So it can create some shifts in how we are looking at our relationships with other programs or other entities that we're considering for the future. So that's just been really concerning. And then we've just really embraced all the information that we can get, whether that's legal assistance for immigrants, making sure that we're passing along those information out there to not just our community, but to politicians or tribal council members that may not be completely informed, so that they understand what those impacts are. What the concern is if we lose funding, what happens if we have to cut staff, what happens if we have to cut resources to our tribal communities, what happens to our clients when we lose those resources, and why why we're at the part of it is that historical context too, is we've fought for so long to get where we're at. And so it's really concerning that it's just being erased so quickly when we had to fight so long just to get to the status of where we're at right now. And so that's been really concerning. And so really educating everyone on our history and on why we're here, where, as far as our services, as far as supporting and recognizing our Two-Spirit, or even, homeless survivors, that homelessness has been a conversation that tribal communities have had for a really long time as far as housing and being able to provide fair housing for our community and preventing others, um, from sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second, but preventing, we don't want to we want to prevent people from losing their homes and being equitable and our resources. And it's really difficult to do with the climate today, not just, the administration and political climate, but just, the housing market as a whole has been a struggle for the last few years. And it just feels like it's exemplified. And where do we house, you know, our victims that are still trying to get back on their feet? And, they're on this line of becoming homeless, and then they're going to be criminalized if they do. And it's just not equitable. And it's just really, really just disheartening that that's a supportive ideology that's moving forward. So.
Thank you for that, Keely. Sylvia, how is your agency responding in this current political moment?
Well, first of all, I believe that we all share these issues that have been, lifted. One of the demands for our time is participating in all the networks and discussions among DV organizations as we're trying to navigate and look at different plans to survive. The sense being that the federal cuts are imminent. At times we go into, but maybe not. Today has been a landmark day in terms of the big, beautiful bill moving out of the Senate, going to Congress. This is the kind of attention that we're having to pay. Yes, to pay that attention. The concern around the federal policies, of course, the issue of how you project who you serve. Even your name, if it has violence or Black or, anything that speaks to sex, sexuality, we know that we're on the target board. So what do we do about that to be able to preserve our resources and to be able to serve those communities? We have not backed away from standing with LGBTQ. Our organization is not an immigrant organization. We do have people with immigration issues because they've sought asylum. But I'll go back to the fact that the criminalization that is happening with the homeless community outside of, the city of Los Angeles does not have that policy at this point. And however, what we're seeing is the aggression of the administration, which is now suing our city and sectioning, yes, taking our resources, holding us hostage. Our concern when we get together is how is this impacting us in terms of being able to plan going forward? There has been good news, the governor's budget, the city of Los Angeles maintaining our budget. These are good things, but how long can we, subsist or survive given the changed terrain? And I think there's a level of denial by boards, funders, and looking for alternative funding is really a challenge because the nonprofits and the status of different foundations are also being threatened. So this is more systemically dismantling the social compact between all the people in the United States and government. And I think that what I've heard people say, it can be overwhelming. And so I'll just end with this point. How does it impact our clients, the women and families that are in our housing? Well, we've seen at Solaris, our housing, that there has been increased activity, police activity. And we know that what is true about Black African Americans, that they get racially profiled by law enforcement. So the minute you draw that kind of attention, the other forces become aware. And so what the concern is that our funding for our housing is threatened. Our our families feel threatened because the overall environment. And our concern is, how do we navigate the current policy without diluting our mission? So I would say the way we're responding is we're standing up and saying we will continue to serve who we've served. If you don't want to use this word or that word, okay, we'll see about that. But we're not in any way going to compromise in that direction. So I'll leave it there and just say that there is a lot of different responses that I'm hearing from this call, but what I do hear is the through line is that the federal policy is upending us, and that chaos is not only causing us confusion, but causing us the precious time that we should be able to invest in our families. So I'll end there.
Thank you for those thoughts, Sylvia, for crystallizing that for us. Sarah, talk to us a little bit more about how your agency is responding to what you're seeing in Orange County.
Yeah, I think I touched on some of the immigration stuff we're doing in terms of policies and procedures, but something else that came up as other folks were talking is the importance of educating our partner agencies about the importance of doing this stuff. I think we're all in network and community, and I think the DV field is very good at sort of mobilizing and communicating. But when I think about some of like our housing partners who aren't as plugged into some of the social justice, or I don't think of them as being as plugged into some of the social justice issues that we are, that we can support them in. Do you have policies and procedures? Are your staff trained? Can we support you in sharing what we have? I feel like there's more good information and resources out there than there were in 2016. I feel like that was a fire drill, and now that folks have sort of mobilized in a more efficient fashion since January. But there are so many good templates and resources out there for nonprofits and businesses. So I think pointing folks in the right direction with that. I think in terms of the queer community, it's, Orange County can be a challenging place to be queer in the best of times. And I think we have really taken pains at our agency to try and make sure that as folks come into the door to our agency, regardless of which of our locations they're coming into, they see that representation, whether it's a pride flag or staff asking about their pronouns and their gender identity. And that's things we've been doing for a long time, and that will not change. I think what's hard is, as we are reviewing our HUD contracts and our unallowable activities on some of our federal contracts, needing to get really crystal clear on what's in our policies and procedures that's written, what's going into our database, what data is being shared with the COC for our HUD contracts, and making sure that we're doing what we need to do to comply with the terms of our contracts, but not changing our agency operations in a way that would alienate the communities that we know it continues to be important for us to serve. I think we've continued to work with LGBTQ+ organizations in Orange County to let them know that we are available as their own, funding is at increased risk. We have a 24-hour hotline, so looking at ways that we can support each other when clients are in crisis, especially as a DV agency for clients experiencing domestic violence. Looking at criminalization of homelessness, I think something that's been really important here we have we have our Orange County Family Violence Council. We have a homelessness and domestic violence task force. That group is comprised a lot of DV advocates, a lot of folks with lived experience. There's homelessness advocates, there's city employees who are doing homelessness work, and it served as a really fertile ground for sharing of information and just being able to stay updated about what's happening, especially as different cities have moved forward with criminalization statutes. A number of different cities, as soon as the law changed, moved forward with that. And interestingly, hearing from advocates who have been in the work for a long time that what they saw on the back end of that was not 100% bad. And it had to do with how it was being implemented and really used as a means of last resort, but that the officers were going out with resources, going out with safety planning, going out with resources, but they actually saw an increase in folks saying yes to placements, which I think caused some tension within the conversation. You know, the group, obviously strong opinions on both sides, but hearing some positive outcomes that had come from that and folks getting housed, which, you know, folks who had been on the street for a long time. So I think still working through that. But the open dialogue is what's important, right? And being able to talk with folks who are touching different pieces of this problem in a respectful way, understanding that people are going to have different opinions about how to tackle this problem, but every single person in the group is committed to tackling the problem and committed to ongoing dialogue. And that just having a space where you can be in dialogue with people that you disagree with feels so special right now, but necessary if we're going to continue to move forward in this work, right? And yeah, I guess I'll stop there.
Okay. Tyler, can you talk to us about, and I know you touched on this earlier, but how your agency is responding and plans to continue to responding to what's going on in the community?
Yeah, advocacy is a big part of our work. And so, as you mentioned, the big bully bill is how I like to phrase it. We just know that intentional efforts to disenfranchise communities in this country tends to be baked into policy. And so, our policy analysts are working very hard to be aware of and note the changes coming down. We have a lot of our canvassers from our civic engagement team, which really kind of was built on voting rules, everything around me, really making sure that they are letting people know that what's in these bills, how you can advocate, how you can call your elected officials, how you can make sure that you hold them accountable. Like you are a constituent, they are pretty much like you are their boss and they have to listen to you. And so we've definitely been honing in on our advocacy and outreach efforts, but we're not backing down. We need to stay firm in our convictions to fight for the human rights of our people and for everyone. And so we really are just getting at the roots of it because the roots of injustice and anti-Blackness are kind of like white supremacy, the patriarchy, and capitalism. And we're recognizing that all of this chaos that is around us kind of has these deep roots. And how can we go forward to fight against that? And that is having these open and honest conversations with the elected officials. As Sarah mentioned, you know, we're being true to ourselves. I think it was very real at the beginning of the year when funding was being pulled, you know, faster than I could snatch my favorite top out of my sister's closet, but it was being snatched every which way. And everyone was really kind of having those concerns, having those debates. Do you want to remove certain words out of the title of your name? Do you want to pull back on certain policies? And for us, it was never a question. We had to remain true to our mission and connecting and building with our partners. What we're also doing is research and storytelling. We are centering the lived experiences and mapping systemic harm, fueling that community power and archiving all of these stories because this regime really seems hell-bent on kind of wanting to rewrite history. And we are making sure that we're holding true to the lived experiences of people who are kind of like experiencing all of this really weird time of unsafety and just feeling like I need to do something as well. I think there's been that really hard balance of I need to protect myself, but I also want to protect the community that I live in. And so, with that kind of community spirit and pulling together that we've seen, especially in Los Angeles, of everyone kind of coming together and kind of fighting against ICE, it's like you really are reinvigorating this community spirit as well. And so, as communities are wanting to come together, as they're wanting to fight for their neighbors, we need to make sure that we're also educating, mobilizing, and empowering people to advocate for their rights and such. And so we've been working in our teams to make sure that we're empowering people with the tools to educate, organize, and inspire action. Especially as we continue to see these policy rollbacks. I mean, I had to mute my BBC News app because I could not take it anymore. So definitely kind of prioritizing yourself, and doing your self-care as well, but also making sure that you have the information to organize and empower. Kind of going back to our policy and systems change work, we're still holding true our local legislation, really meeting with these policymakers, figuring out what is your plan, what is your goal, like how do you plan to stand up against these harms. We're coming up on a heat wave, kind of going back to everyone, the criminalization of the unhoused people. We're coming up on a heat wave. And so we as an organization always stay connected and let people know about Ready LA, which provides, the updates on the heat index and the cooling centers. But we've also kind of understood that as people are kind of like hiding out, what are you doing to help to make sure that these impacted communities within your district are protected? You have about half of the heat related deaths come from unhoused people in LA. And it's just not fair, especially, I mean, I'm about to turn on my fan now because it's getting hot in the office, but really holding true to these elected officials, to these local legislators, and meeting with them. Everyone has the power to be able to meet, to make meetings, to send an email, to make a call. And so we understand that policy is personal, and these people need to know the lived experiences that you are having within their own district. And so that's what we're kind of doing on top of like mobilizing, just connecting with the policy and then getting that community education, organizing out, but also just doing research and storytelling to make sure that we're giving power back to the community in the best way that we think is powerful and is mindful.
Thank you for that, Tyler. I would agree. I think for FELC here in the Bay Area, we're definitely leaning into being a good coalition partner, whether that is at the local level in the city of Oakland or at the county level in Alameda County, and being coalition partners with people we may not have been in coalition with previously. So we are a DV and sexual assault agency, so we're oftentimes partnering with other DV agencies, but that means we're also partnering a lot more and in coalition with um, gun violence agencies and gang violence agencies, and being a part of prevention coalitions. We're also joining with homeless service providers because in Alameda County, we're definitely being impacted by the increase in homelessness that is happening across California. So thank you for reminding us, Sarah, about how important it is to be in coalition, be a good partner, and Keely reminding us that being an ally, and I think I've heard, who was it, Miriam Kaba, that said, don't be my ally, be my accomplice, because that way you're not leaving when it's convenient for you. You have skin in the game, you are participating. Another question I wanted to ask everyone is, what resources do you need to expand your work, continue your work, deepen your work? And so I'd like to start with Sarah, talking to us about what resources are important to your agency.
Yeah, I mean, definitely financial resources. We've been doing a lot of advocacy at the local level because for all of the threats to cuts to our federal funding, where we have actually seen a real cut happen has been at the local level. And yes, that's in response to trickle down dollars from mostly federal programs. but we've seen actual cuts to our county-funded programs. So we've been at the Board of Supervisors meetings. We've brought clients to the Board of Supervisors meetings. Our partners and their clients have gone to the Board of Supervisors meetings. So I think that that connection, that advocacy piece, and not being afraid to speak up, because I think we sort of assume that our elected officials have all of the information about when these cuts are being made and the process behind them and the impact that the cuts are going to have. And I don't think that's, I mean, I know that that's not always the case. So get them into your programs for tours, talk to them about the impact your programs are having. But I think the community and private funders stepping up to fill the gap is really critical, where we know that these resources are going to be eliminated. Another thing that I think is critical is legal support. We're fortunate to have some, pro bono support through our board and other connections that we've made over the years, but I know a lot of agencies are not in that position. And I think if you have attorneys in your networks and they're not already doing something, there's so many opportunities to support nonprofits. Contract review is so essential right now as we're getting handed these contracts, knowing that we don't really have any negotiating power. The choice you have is not to sign the contract. It's not, hey, could we remove these harmful grant conditions out of our contract? You're either going to sign it or not. But understanding and having a competent contracts attorney review the language so you understand the liability that you're taking on, you understand what's being dictated in terms of any potential programmatic changes that you might have to make, or reporting changes or data entry changes or anything like that. I think those are two of the biggest things. But I think community continues to be really critical just to keep all of us sane. I think these spaces that we're in with other leaders and other advocates continue to be a source of inspiration and sanity-giving place for me. So I think finding the spaces that fill your cup, because there's a lot of cup depleting going on right now.
Thank you, Sarah. May, can you talk to us about what resources your agency needs?
Yes to all of the examples of, financial donations, volunteers, legislation, yes to all of that. But I think that what I have really found is vital and important in going through this is a mission-driven board. I could not do the work that I'm doing or trying to do in terms of visibility and advocacy if I had a board that I was having to fight as well. And we have had those boards in the past who would not have been supportive of staying rooted in our mission and what it takes for all people to be safe. And our current board is. I have a legislative action subcommittee that I can forward all of the legislative alerts to that are coming in faster than I can even read them, much less respond to them. There are some of them that are being trained on how to do like quick public speaking moments in the community, like at city council meetings and things like that. And there has never been a question of not moving backwards in the work that we've been doing around inclusion and equity. And without that, I don't think any of those other things would matter nearly as much. So I'm very grateful for a mission-rooted board.
Thank you, May. Tyla, can you talk to us about what resources your organization needs to keep the work going?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I think my internet is actually unstable now, but we oh, are you guys able to hear me? Sorry, I'm frozen on my side. Okay, perfect. So we need flexible and like long-term funding to continue to do the work to sustain our grassroots programs, and to help to respond to all of the constant things that are happening, we want to be able to be with our community. So flexible and long-term funding is probably what is best of our biggest needs. And we also really need staff and volunteers. So help us to do the work in the community, help us to be a part and to continue to move the needle and to hold the line in this administration. So we're definitely always accepting members, always accepting volunteers. So those are probably the biggest um, resources that we need to continue to do the work. But I think May made a really good point of the supportive board. We're very grateful for our board who's always willing to support us in any kind of crazy idea that we may have. So that was a really great point that I definitely would love to echo behind is having the true leadership to be able to guide the ship when the waters get very rocky.
Thank you for that. Sylvia, can you talk to us a little bit about the resources that would help your organization continue the work or expand and deepen the work?
I want to say ditto for everything that has already been spoken to. So I'll make two short points. One, we will need funds for our housing. Um, so much of the federal funds have gone toward our housing development. Our other area, of course, are the legal services for DV survivors. We're not talking about, in particular, anybody with documentation issues. It is about being able to meet the increased demand. And as we look at that, we're also faced with, um, you know, constricting funds coming into the organization. So the notion of hiring more staff, I think everyone's at a pause right now, waiting to see when the shoe's going to drop. So volunteers have been critical to Genesee, and we could use, many more volunteers, in particular to do some of the escorts with our women and to be able to work with some of our programs like the youth program, examples like that. So I would turn that back over to you, Tunisia.
Thank you. Keely, talk to us about some of the resources that Strong-Hearted Native women could use to deepen the work or continue the work you're doing.
Oh, I would just, well, definitely what everyone's already said, financial, legal assistance, housing assistance. I mean, those are all just vital components of trying to assist our community. I think the biggest key is the flexibility of funding when it comes in to be able to do what we need to do for clients and that having our funders trust us to be able to do that. Um, to continue the work, I mean, gosh, I would love to be able to increase my staff and be able to do more of our cultural, ways of healing and activities that go into supporting our clients and to be able to expand on that and to support more of that work. Um, and then just in general, as we look at diversifying our funding, it's really difficult to get just general operation expenses covered. Mm-hmm. And it would just be lovely to be able to do that as a nonprofit, to have not to have to worry about the general operations, paying our office rent or whatever that is just to stay in business, or not having to work out of our homes. I know a lot of people love working out of their homes, but it's nice to have a place to meet and to gather together. So I think that's really important. And then also, being able to do more to support our staff that does the work. We've been fortunate to be able to do a lot of team building and healing for our own staff, but I would love to have the capability to continue that and to continue to support, all of the frontline workers that do so much for our clients and for our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Keely. And Kimberly, can you bring it on home for us?
I'll do my best. I'm just going to echo my colleagues here. We all need it. We need safe, stable, flexible funding. I think the flexible is the underscore here, allowing us to be responsive to an extremely unpredictable landscape. We need flexible funding that allows us to pivot as we need to adapt and pivot to these different changes. Similarly, lightly restricted or unrestricted revenue is always valuable because it allows us to fill in those gaps that other grant funds and federal protections aren't allowing us to tap into right now. Our sister agencies also more funding for housing. We need it, but even more so locally, especially in rural communities, we need more local options for supportive and affordable housing. We have a little bit of funding, but getting access to housing locally with supportive services is a real challenge for us in rural communities. I also want to say creating spaces to be heard. I've learned a lot in this panel just from the powerful voices in this committee. And in rural communities like ours, where resources are very scarce, but the demand continues to present itself, it's really critical that we work and we stand strong to shift those narratives and amplify our voices and the voices of those that are being impacted by this legislation and by this. I really liked what you said about not backing down and not allowing the current conditions to rewrite history and how you're actively capturing it as it unfolds. I found that to be very powerful. And I just really appreciate this panel. We're all champions of the same message, but I truly learned something from all of you. So I really appreciate this opportunity and the space that you created here today. So thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. I would like to thank each of our experts who have come and share their expertise um, from across the state of California, talking to us about housing and homelessness and how we're responding for immigrants, how we're showing up for LGBTQ plus folks, how we are responding to the criminalization of homelessness and to the control of women's bodies and reproductive health, people's bodies. And so I'm just so grateful to have been a part of this conversation. And I'd like to thank our audience who has listened intently. And right now, I'd like to close us out. We have a couple of minutes, so I'd just like everyone, each of you, to unmute. I'll call you by name to unmute and let us know how we can get in touch with your organization because we will share the clips and post this on social media. We want anyone listening to be able to know how to get in contact with your organization. So if you have social media, if you have a phone number, a 1-800 number, a hotline, any of that, if you could just unmute and let us know how to get in contact with you. So I'll start with May at Haven.
So if you go to our website, havenstan.org, that's HAVENSTAN.org, that will give you all of the other information that you need if you want to contact me, anyone else in our leadership team, our crisis line number, any information about how to reach us.
Thank you, May. Sarah at Human Options, can you tell us how to get in contact with you?
Yes, it's humanoptions.org, and then our hotline number is 877-854-3594.
Okay, Sylvia at Genesee.
Yes, Genesee Center, you can contact us at 323-299-9496. And we're at genesee.org, and we have an Instagram account, and I'm sorry I don't have the handle, but if you reach out to us, we will definitely share all that information with you.
Thank you. Keely.
Yes, strongheartednativewomen.org is our website. And we also we're on Facebook and Instagram, and you can also reach out to us by email at info@shnwc.org. That's info@shnwc.org. Or you can call us at 760-644-4781. That's 760-644-4781. Thank you.
Kimberly.
Thank you, Tunisia. Empowered Tehama 24/7, 365 crisis hotline is 530-528-0226. You can access our services via our website as well, www.empoweredtehama.org. We are available 24/7, 365 via that crisis hotline. I also like to remind people that the National DV hotline is available and can help you navigate to the DV organization in your area. 800-799-SAFE. Thank you.
Kyla.
Absolutely. So Black Women for Wellness shows up every day, not just in the face of crisis. So we work to make long-term solutions rooted in joy, justice, and healing. So if you want to join us and learn more about either RJ, environmental justice, civic engagement, you can email us at info@bwwla.com. That's info@bwwla.com. You can follow us on social medias at BW4WLA, or you can visit our website at bwwla.org.
Thank you. And I work at the Family Violence Law Center. Our website is fvlc.org, and our crisis line is 800-947-8301. So thank you again for joining us for this conversation about how we, the home cohort, housing opportunities mean everything, are showing up for our communities in our communities. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Tunisia. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Great to meet you all.
Bye.
Bye.